We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, and thank you for being with us as we look around the globe, searching for those ideas, those processes, the materials, the technologies that may take us through the 21st century. All we hear about is all the challenges that we have: severe climate change, oil leaking into the Gulf, volcanoes, hurricanes, earthquakes happening in sequence all around the globe. And we're saying, what is really happening? What is going on here? And are we actually taking many steps back as far as the development of civilization? As you know, now we're moving towards 7 billion human beings on the planet. Over 195 metropolitan areas are actually in the worst ecological zones on the globe, and those populations, they are expanding. So it's no doubt that we're going to have increased serious catastrophic change, and at the same time, maybe catastrophic loss of life. But what can we do to change that so that we're not beholding to all the forces of nature and at the same time bring ourselves into harmony with nature? And that's the essence of the Green Movement, and that's the essence of City 21. We have Christopher Zaloff with us, who is the president and the creator of something that I just think is absolutely fantastic. In the last segment, we saw the footage on the movie, City 21, talking about where we're going into the 21st and the 22nd century. So, Chris, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. And I want to bring up this first slide. I like this graphic that you have here as far as this whole cycle and looking at the urbanization. As we talked about in our last segment, 54% of the world's population are now in urban areas for the first time in the history of humankind. People moving out of the countrysides. Tell us a little bit about the philosophy, the essence of City 21 through the graphics that you have at the beginning of your movie.
Okay, well, we're taking a deep time and a deep design perspective. Deep time, which you saw at the beginning of the trailer, hopefully with Lauren Isley talking about the emergence of life. Cities emerged about 8,000 years ago. Some people say 10,000 years ago. And it's a phenomenon that has evolved through history, and here we are in 2010, and we're still figuring out what cities are and how to make them better. And a deep design perspective is looking at ancient man who just begins to make tools and invent language and control fire, and now we are the organism that really shapes the planet, and our tools now used to be nature was immutable. Now nature is mutable. So our tools are very powerful, and so how can we use them to create cities that work for more and more people?
And the whole thing about these tools that you're talking about, we've gone from bows and arrows when I was living in Papua New Guinea, which in many ways is still somewhat a Stone Age society with wooden-tipped arrows and stone adzes and all that. And right next door in Australia, you're dealing with nuclear bombs and missiles and all modern warfare. So you have these two juxtaposition next to each other. And that's what we're talking about here as far as the City 21 is how are we going to transition where we have this tremendous power, maybe power that we don't even know how to control ourselves, even though we helped create it, and make that so it's actually useful purposes into the future. And looking at this City 21, how do you take this image that we have right here and say this is how we're shaping the future and it's going to be for the betterment of humankind?
Well, part of what this image is talking about is learning how to learn. So we want to move towards a desired future. But you can see the image on the right showing a city that is integrated with nature and is using technologies that are based on renewable energy, and the people look a lot more happy. I think that's one of the ideas, that the search for sustainability, key word, is connected to the search for happiness.
And the whole thing about happiness, if we would look at modern society and say that happiness is through material wealth and through incomes and all that, we wouldn't have drugs, we wouldn't have crime, we wouldn't have all these things going on in humankind. But yet, you know, from the start of civilization all the way through, regardless of the socioeconomic standing or wealth, we still have all these detriments within society. but yet we're trying to move beyond that and hopefully bring about a better life and also a better environment which to shape and mold future generations. And I believe that's some of the essence of City 21, if I have the full meaning of what it is you're trying to convey.
Yes, I mean, certainly we have the power to shape the environment like never before, and we have the tools to shape the environment like never before. Do we have the imagination, and do we have the capacity to do it, is I think one of the questions. Can we learn how to shape a future that integrates nature, technology, and humanity in a way that does not deplete resources?
Now looking at this is going on the biofuels, and this is something that Emerald Planet is about as far as identifying these 1,000 best practices, and many of those deal with alternative. Of course, we see the solar collectors and probably wind and everything else all combined in this as this machine moves across the face of the earth and harvesting the crops. How do you think this technology and nature and the production of food and fiber and energy is going to propel us in a positive way through the 21st century?
Well, part of what that image is about is, of course, it's dramatic, and it's hard to find exciting images about the future because we're not very good at that as a species. We're more into catastrophe theory, at least the mainstream media. So part of that image is showing a domestic energy that we harvest right here in America rather than import from far away. And biofuels obviously come from the environment right here. Solar is free every day, and we're using less than 1% of it. And wind, of course, is another phenomenon that we're just beginning to tap into.
Now this is looking at these images here of this city of the future where you're integrating wind, solar, you're just everything as far as these hanging gardens, almost like going back again to the hanging gardens of Babylon and thinking about ancient societies. We were talking about the dream world, the dream life that the Aborigines created some 33,000 years ago, supposedly. So what you're looking at then is that we're going back to very ancient notions and very ancient societies as maybe a platform or a conceptualization, if you will, for the future. Is that what we're seeing here?
Well, we're going to learn from all the civilizations in the past. What this ideal of that image is talking about or illuminating is that a building itself can produce its own energy, grow some of its own food, process its own wealth, and perhaps be a net exporter of intelligence.
And that net exporter could be the very next building, or it could be a country 7,000 miles away.
Well, it could be a building, it could be a city. That's part of the idea, is that the city itself is a net exporter rather than a net consumer, which most of our cities are now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Turn off the electricity, how long will that city stay in its dream space?
All we need to look at is the winters we've had over the last couple of years, and there's an easy answer to that, is people get very irritable very quickly.
Right.
As we're moving forward. Looking at this, now this is a combination of wind and also I would assume this is also maybe incorporating some of the wave and other kinds of energies that are going on. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, this is also getting towards a new aesthetic. That ecological design implies a new aesthetic, a new way of thinking about how the built environment looks to us. And that could be an entranceway to a city. That could be a place where we go to renew ourselves. So that's an imaginary design there, but certainly that's about wind and that's about water.
Well, the whole thing about this, Chris, when I was traveling Europe 2 years ago, I was in 6 countries, specifically looking at the renewable energy, the biofuels and others, and the design they're using there as far as the wind turbines and others, very elegant compared to the turbine. Here it's very functional, it's technical, it's supposedly very efficient, but yet they have this efficiency, the technology, and all that tied in, but still it's a very elegant design. And I think that's what I'm seeing in some of these conceptualizations that you have here, is that yes, it's utility, it's technology, but yet it has an elegance, a simplicity. And now I draw that simplicity out of the Zen of Japan and other places, where you're bringing these efficiency of lines use of less materials, but yet a very sophisticated and high level of life. And I think that's what you're all about.
Yeah, well, you got the key there. You got the clue, elegance. And that's an architecture and design challenge, how to integrate it into our everyday life so that it uplifts us and it's not intruding. And this is like third generation now of ecological design, and I think we're moving towards that, where the designs are part of everyday life. They're not intruding, and the historic preservationists don't get upset that perhaps we can see this as a evolution of civilization.
As we're moving in. Looking at this right here, we're talking about hydrogen, and of course, many of the seminars I attend in Washington, D.C. and abroad saying that hydrogen's 50 years away. Yeah, but if you look at what's going on in Iceland and some other countries, they're saying, we're already using hydrogen. I mean, why would you say it's 50 years away? So where is this balance between what's going on in various nation states, and how can we share that information so that technology of one nation state is shared equally with others?
Well, that's a good question. That's the first hydrogen station in the world, I believe, there in Iceland. Certainly the future is not being invented out of the political structure. It's being invented through design.